Where the story began is not a date, but a threshold. It suggests a first step taken in darkness, before chronicles, before crowns, when meaning was carried in breath instead of ink. Beneath that phrase lives a quiet heresy, that the sacred may have come first, and the civilized world followed after, like a shadow trying to catch up. It is the hint of a hidden origin, an altar without a king, a vow without a written law, a temple raised by nameless hands. And Göbekli Tepe holds an even deeper contradiction, a sanctuary that appears too early, as though time itself misplaced it. That is the secret the hill seems to guard, an ancient spiral of cause and consequence, where hunger and wonder trade masks, where gathering becomes destiny, and where the earliest beginning may not be birth, but remembrance. It is said that in forgotten corners of the earth, there are places that do not announce themselves. They do not shine. They do not call out with banners or bells. They simply wait, like a sealed chamber beneath a floor of grass, like a name sleeping under dust. And so we come, gently, to a low hill in Anatolia, a soft rise in the land, a sleeping shoulder beneath a pale sky. The wind moves over it with careful hands, combing through dry blades and wildflowers, as if afraid to wake what lies below. The air feels thin and ancient, as though every breath must ask permission. Whispers tell us that long before the world learned to keep records, before cities wore their lights like jewelry, before rulers carved their faces into stone, this hill already held a secret. Not loud, not triumphant, but deliberate and deeply, almost tenderly sacred. Beneath the silence, a question arrives like a moth touching a lamp. Who lifted a temple before history learned its own name? There is no quick answer. Only the hush of limestone and the slow patience of earth. Some believe the hill was chosen by starlight, by the way the heavens turn, steady and indifferent, above the sleeping land. They imagine nights so clear that the sky felt close enough to touch, the stars like scattered seeds across a dark cloth. They imagine people watching the turning above them, feeling a pattern in it, a pulse, a rhythm, an invisible order that made the world feel less wild, less cruel. Others believe it was not starlight that chose this place, but grief, because grief, too, gathers. It returns. It circles back to the same ground, the same view, the same silence, seeking a door that will not open, seeking a voice that will not answer. Some believe the first sanctuaries are born not from power, but from longing, the human need to speak with what cannot speak back. So the hill rises there, quiet, veiled, and listening. If you stand upon it in the early morning, where the mist drifts low like pale incense, you can almost feel the buried architecture beneath your feet. Not as a map, not as a measured plan, but as an echo in the bones. A subtle hollowness, like a held breath. A hidden spiral beneath the soil. A chamber of intention, where memory fades, stone becomes more than stone. Here, stone is not yet monument. It is not yet a proclamation. It is memory waiting to be touched, shaped not to dominate the world, but to invite the world into a circle of meaning. In that thought, there is a quiet astonishment, not kings, not palaces, not written vows, yet still a sanctuary, shaped with care, an impossible contradiction, resting like moonlight on dust. We imagine the first approach, long ago. There are no roads, only the land's own soft pathways. People arrive in small groups, their footsteps muted by grass and soil. They carry little, because in those days life itself was carried lightly. But they bring something heavier than tools. They bring intention. They bring the sense that this hill is different, marked by the moon. The place gathers them into stillness. And when stillness gathers enough souls, it begins to feel like a doorway. Some believe they raised pillars, tall, solemn forms, like silent beings standing shoulder to shoulder in the dim. T-shaped stones, pale as bone, lifted into place with patience and communal will, not to impress a stranger, not to threaten an enemy, but to hold a space, the sacred hollow, where the invisible might lean close. And on those stones, they carved the world they feared and revered, creatures of the threshold, fox and serpent, boar and bird, claw and wing, not as decoration, but as symbols, like prayers in a language of teeth and starlight. The animals do not smile. They do not soften themselves for human comfort. They are carved as they are, watchful, wild, eternal, as if to say, the sacred is not only gentle, it is also vast. The air in such a chamber would have been thick with shadow and flame, torchlight trembling against carved reliefs, smoke rising like a slow veil toward the night, breaths layered together, many lungs, one rhythm, until the space itself became a living thing, filled with the warmth of presence. And yet, no one knows precisely what was spoken there. That is part of the spell. The hill holds withheld knowledge. It keeps its story folded inward, like a scroll never unrolled. We can sense the shape of devotion, but not its exact words. We can feel the ritual's gravity, but not its name. We can imagine singing, or silence, or both, because some ceremonies are not made of sound, but of attention. And still the question remains, persistent as an ember. Why here? Why then? Why at all? Perhaps the temple was the beginning of gathering, and gathering was the beginning of everything that came after. Perhaps the circle taught humans how to be together in one place, for one purpose, under one sky. Or perhaps it was a farewell, an oceanic goodbye to the old world of wandering, offered in stone before the veil of life changed forever. We do not know. We only drift nearer, not as visitors, but as listeners, letting the hill's silence speak in its own slow way. At dusk, the ridge grows cooler. The sky turns the color of faded copper and dusk blue, and shadows lengthen like soft fingers across the land. You can stand there and see almost nothing, only grass, soil, the gentle curve of earth. And yet you can feel everything, circles nested beneath you, crumbled and buried, patient in the dark. It is a strange feeling to be above a sacred chamber you cannot see, and to sense that it sees you. Night finally lowers its cloth across the hill. The stars arrive, quiet, innumerable. Wind moves again, careful as prayer, and the land returns to its oldest posture, waiting. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, not fully. Perhaps the hill does not want an ending, only an opening. A gate made not of stone, but of wonder. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And so, with the temple sleeping beneath the earth, and the sky turning slowly above, we let the question remain unanswered. We let it soften. We let it become a lullaby, an ancient spiral of dust and starlight, guiding the mind toward rest, where beginnings do not need explanations, only silence. It is said that moonlight can turn stone into water. On certain nights, when the sky is clear and the air is thin, the limestone plains of Anatolia shine with a pale, gentle glow, like a quiet sea frozen in place. The world becomes soft-edged, as if the night has wrapped everything in a veil. And above that silver hush, a lone ridge stands, unremarkable to hurried eyes, yet charged with something older than hurry. Marked by the moon, the ridge seems to breathe, not in the way living things do. No rise of chest, no pulse beneath skin, yet there is a hidden rhythm in it, a subtle pressure in the air, a feeling that the ground is keeping a secret with great patience. Beneath the silence, a question arrives, simple and therefore endless. What does the earth choose to keep? We approach slowly, as one approaches a sacred hall, not with footsteps that demand, but with footsteps that listen. The night wind slides across the hillside, moving through grasses like fingers combing through hair. Every sound is softened, each breath, each shift of dust, each distant call from the dark. Göbekli Tepe does not feel like a place you merely visit. It feels like a sealed chamber of the world's early dreaming, an interior hidden beneath open sky. You can stand on the ridge and see only soil, plants, scattered stone. And yet, if you remain long enough, the hill begins to speak in sensations rather than words. It is said that long ago, when the nights were deeper, people came here. They came before towns gathered into walls, before writing stitched memory into lines, before crowns made power visible. They carried no banners, only bundles of reeds and flint, and the quiet, weighty thing we call intention. Whispers tell us they returned again and again, not because the hill offered comfort, but because it offered meaning. Some believe there was an invisible thread in the air, an oceanic pull, like tides in the blood, a sense that this ridge was a meeting place between what is seen and what is felt, a place where the sky leaned close, and the earth listened back. We move through imagined darkness with them, guided by footsteps we cannot truly hear. We see their silhouettes only in the mind, small figures crossing pale stone under starlight, pausing as if approaching a gate. The gate is not a door of wood or bronze, but a threshold of attention. Here, the act of arriving may have been the first ritual, and then the raising, not loud, not violent, not announced. Where memory fades, the hill becomes a living archive. Beneath its skin, circles rest inside circles, nested enclosures, like spirals in a shell, like breath held within breath. For thousands of years the earth has held them, folded inward, as though protecting something too delicate for daylight. In the mind's eye, we glimpse the limestone pillars, tall and pale, like figures standing in a ring. Their surfaces are carved with animals that seem to emerge from the stone itself. Foxes and serpents, boars and birds, creatures of shadow and instinct. They do not look like decoration. They look like a language that does not use letters. Some believe the carvings were prayers. Others believe they were warnings. And some believe they were names for forces too vast to be spoken aloud. The mystery deepens because there is no carved proclamation of purpose. No grand declaration that says this is what we're doing here. Instead, there's only the strange certainty that something mattered enough to raise, and later, to conceal. That concealment is part of the hill's remembering. Not all remembrance is open and bright. Some remembrance is veiled, hidden under dust as if under a blanket. Göbekli Tepe was not only built, it was covered, patiently, deliberately, filled in with earth, sealed like a chamber closed after a ceremony. Why would people bury what they had labored to lift? Some believe the covering was protection, an act of guardianship, like placing a precious object back into a chest. Others believe it was closure, a ritual ending performed with care, the last torch extinguished, the last hand resting on cold stone, the last breath offered into a circle that had done its work. Perhaps the world outside changed. Perhaps the people changed. Perhaps the ritual itself demanded disappearance, as if the sacred needed to return underground to remain sacred. Or perhaps, more quietly, perhaps it was never meant to be found in the way we think of finding. As we sink deeper into the chapter, the emotional current shifts. Curiosity loosens into reverence. The hill no longer feels like a puzzle. It feels like a guardian. And the earth becomes more than earth. It becomes a keeper of vows, a keeper of early human longing, when the wild still spoke freely in the distance, when the boundary between survival and spirit was thin as mist, when stars were not far-away concepts, but silent companions overhead. In that time, a ridge could be more than a ridge. It could be a temple without walls, an archive without ink, a story told by stone and silence. We stand now under the same sky, listening. The starlight spreads across the hillside, cool and steady. The wind continues its slow hymn. The grasses sway like a congregation in prayer, and the ridge remains, unmoving, watchful, as though it has been listening to humanity since before humanity knew how to speak. Perhaps it is still listening now. Perhaps the hill remembers not only what was built beneath it, but the feeling that built it, the quiet gathering, the shared breath, the sacred uncertainty. And perhaps that is why it waits, because some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And in the last hush of this chapter, with the moon thinning behind a veil of cloud, we let the question remain unanswered. What does the earth choose to keep? Maybe it keeps what we are not yet ready to carry. It is said that dawn is a kind of forgiveness. Before the sun fully arrives, the world is softened, edges blurred, colors hushed, the air still holding night in its lungs. A pale haze spreads across the land like a thin veil, and the limestone plains glow with quiet gentleness, as if the earth has been washed clean in starlight. On such a morning, breath catches in cold air, and even silence seems to have a voice. And then, very slowly, as if emerging from a dream, the pillars reveal themselves. Tall forms rise from the chamber like patient sentinels. Their surfaces are pale, worn, and calm. They do not shout their presence. They simply stand, as though they have been standing for so long that the act of standing has become sacred. Beneath the silence, a question arrives with a tremor of wonder. Are these stones merely carved, or are they meant to be seen as presence? We move into the chamber as one might move into a sanctuary, without hurry, without the need to disturb what is already complete. The ground is uneven beneath the feet, scattered with dust and small fragments of time. The air feels different here, heavier, older, like a room that has held many breaths and still remembers their shape. The T-shaped forms wait in a circle, each one distinct, and yet bound together by a shared stillness. Their tops spread like shoulders, their bodies narrow like a spine, and in some, the carvings offer something almost intimate. The faint suggestion of arms along the sides, hands resting near a belt of stone, a posture of quiet attention. Not a portrait, not a statue, something quieter, as if the human shape has been translated into stone prayer. Some believe these pillars are ancestors without names, elders carved not as individuals, but as a shared lineage, gathered into limestone the way stories are gathered into song. They imagine the builders choosing not to depict faces, because the face is temporary, and the presence is eternal. In that thought, the pillars become a congregation of the unseen, standing in the chamber to remember those who first stood here. Others believe the pillars are guardians, silent witnesses placed where the veil between worlds thins, where the ordinary rules of earth loosen, and the sacred can drift closer. The chamber becomes a gate, not outward, but inward, a threshold into a deeper layer of human longing, where fear and devotion share the same breath. Whispers tell us the carvings are not decoration. They are a language of symbols, animals etched into stone like celestial signatures. A serpent winding through limestone, a fox watchful and sharp, birds with wings outspread, as if caught in a moment of eternal lifting. These creatures are not gentle. They are wild, ancient, honest. They feel like messengers from a time when humans lived close to the edge of mystery, when survival and spirit were braided together like reed and rope. And yet, even surrounded by animals, the chamber feels human. Not in the modern sense, no furniture, no comfort, no warm domestic glow, but in the older sense, when human meant gathering in darkness and trying to touch what cannot be touched. We listen for the ceremony that once lived here. It is gone, and still it lingers. The air seems heavy with old ritual, smoke that has long since faded, voices reduced to vibration, footsteps absorbed by soil. The chamber holds the memory of firelight trembling against carved reliefs, the memory of shadows moving like slow water across stone shoulders. Even now, in the quiet of dawn haze, it feels as though something has only just stepped away, and might return, if we wait long enough. Some believe the builders worked with many hands moving as one breath. They imagine the sound of stone against stone, patient chipping, careful shaping, like a hymn without words. They imagine days measured by sunlight and hunger, nights measured by stars and stories. No written vows, yet vows nonetheless, sealed in repetition, in return, in the decision to raise something that would outlast the body. And this is where the contradiction hums, softly, insistently, beneath everything. These are not the works of settled cities. There are no grand streets leading here, no palace walls, no carved royal names demanding recognition. And yet the chamber carries the calm authority of a temple. It holds order. It holds symmetry. It holds intention. It feels like a sacred hall built by those who had not yet invented the formal architecture of power, as if the sacred came first and civilization followed, trying to explain it. We drift among the stone beings, letting each one feel like a figure half-remembered. The pillars do not tell us who built them. They offer no signature, no confession. They simply stand, and in their standing they imply community, a gathering of minds, a gathering of longing, a gathering of ritual so old it has become almost oceanic, moving beneath the surface of time. Where memory fades, the chamber becomes a mirror. It reflects back a question we rarely ask in a modern world. What did we worship before we knew the word for worship? What did we seek before we learned to name seeking? The dawn shifts. The haze thins. Light enters the chamber in soft angles. The stones brighten slightly, then recede again into shadow. And as the day begins to claim the sky, the chamber seems to draw inward, protecting its mystery, keeping its breath held. We do not leave with certainty. We leave with a feeling, an unanswered presence, like someone behind a door, listening, but never opening. And perhaps that is the truest ritual here. Not revelation, but quiet companionship with the unknown. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And in the near darkness at the edge of morning, the stone beings remain, unchanged, patient, veiled, standing in their silent circle, as if they have been waiting for us to become quiet enough to hear them. It is said that the earliest stories were not spoken. They were traced. They were pressed into clay, knotted into rope, sung into smoke, and sometimes, when silence demanded something stronger, they were cut into stone. The invitation begins close and intimate, as if your eyes have entered a sacred chamber and the rest of the world has fallen away. A lantern-like glow, imagined gentle, moves across limestone, not with haste, but with reverence. It reveals a fox caught mid-step, its body stretched in eternal motion. It reveals a boar with bristling certainty, solid as stubborn earth. It reveals a serpent winding through stone, as if it never needed flesh at all. Marked by the moon, the relief seemed to breathe in the half-light. And the first question arrives, quiet and sharp as a needle. Why did the earliest sanctuary speak in animals? We drift along the carved surfaces, as though through a dream bestiary. Each creature appears and disappears beneath the moving glow, like a memory surfacing and sinking again. The chamber feels less like architecture and more like a hushed library, except the pages are limestone, and the ink is shadow. Beneath the silence, the wild is not outside the circle. It is invited in. In this ancient place, the animals are not distant background. They are present. They are witnesses. They are sacred companions or sacred warnings, standing at the edge of human understanding. Some believe each creature is a symbol, a blessing for endurance, a warning against arrogance, a sign of seasons and migration, a fox for cunning and survival, a boar for stubborn strength, a serpent for the unseen path, life shedding its skin, returning renewed, returning changed. Others believe the animals are masks worn by forces without faces, names for mysteries too large to hold in human mouths. Because how do you speak of hunger as a spirit? How do you carve fear into a shape that can be understood without breaking the mind? How do you honor death without turning away? You carve a vulture. You carve a scorpion. You carve a lion. Silent power crouched in stone. Whispers tell us that long ago, these creatures were not only symbols, they were neighbors. The landscape breathed differently. The air carried different calls at night. The horizon was not softened by roads or lights. It was sharp and vast, full of eyes. To live then was to live close to the edge of the unknown. And when you live at an edge for long enough, the edge becomes sacred. You begin to feel that the world is speaking to you. Through paw prints, through wing beats, through the way an animal watches, without blinking. You begin to suspect that the wild contains messages that cannot be translated into simple speech. So you take the wild into the sanctuary, and you give it a throne of stone. Where memory fades, we try to imagine the hands that carved these reliefs. Not the hands of kings, not the hands of scribes, but the hands of those who learned meaning by listening to the land. Hands that knew the weight of flint, the resistance of limestone. Hands that understood patience. To carve is to repeat a motion until the stone yields. To carve is to offer time. And the offering itself is a kind of devotion. A forbidden tenderness enters the chapter here. The thought that these images were not decoration, but reverence. Not art for beauty alone, but prayer for relationship. A way of saying, we are not alone in this world. We are surrounded by forces that watch and move and vanish. We want to honor them. We want to ask them to be gentle. We move deeper into the dream bestiary, and the chamber begins to feel like a meeting between worlds. a place where the human breath meets the animal breath, even if only in symbol, even if only in carved echo. Some believe these creatures marked a boundary between the living and the dead, that the vulture, so often seen near bodies, was a messenger between flesh and sky, that the serpent, moving without legs, belonged to hidden realms beneath the earth, that the scorpion, small and lethal, was proof that danger could be sacred too, because danger teaches respect. And there's that word again, respect. In the modern world, animals are often made small in our minds, reduced to stories for children or shadows in distant documentaries. But in the chamber of Göbekli Tepe, the animals feel immense. They are not tame. They do not exist to flatter us. They exist as reminders. The world is older than us. The emotional arc turns, gently, from fascination to melancholy, because these animals are vivid, yet they are also ghosts. They are proof of a landscape that once held different life, different balance, different fear. Some of the creatures carved here still walk the earth, but their relationship to humans has changed. Others have retreated into rare corners of the world, or into the quiet distance of memory. The carvings become a record of an ancient intimacy, the time when survival and spirit were braided together like reeds in a single rope. We linger with that sadness, but we do not let it harden. Instead, it softens into reverence, because perhaps the carvings are also a gift, a way the past reaches toward us without words, a way of saying that devotion once meant paying attention, deep attention, to everything that lived and moved and watched beneath the stars. The lantern-like glow drifts onward, slower now, as if it too is becoming sleepy. It finds one final silhouette carved into stone, an animal half in shadow, half in pale light. The edges are worn, the details are softened by time, yet the presence remains, and the meaning slips away. It is said that stone can hold an image longer than it can hold an explanation. The animal remains, and the interpretation dissolves like breath in cold air. We are left with sacred uncertainty, like starlight on limestone, beautiful, quiet, and unreachable. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully understood. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the chamber darkens again, the animals return to their endless stillness, etched in starlight, guarded by dust, waiting in silence, as if the wild itself has become a prayer that never ends. It is said that there are places where night does not simply fall. It gathers. It settles into the ground like a dark cloak laid carefully over stone. It waits in the hollow between pillars. It listens for voices that once rose like smoke and have never fully disappeared. And so we begin inside an imagined ring of darkness. The sky above is a slow bowl of stars, wide, steady, without hurry. The earth beneath is cool, and if you imagine bare feet upon it, you can almost feel the fine grit of limestone dust. The air tastes faintly of mineral and distance. Somewhere beyond the circle, the wild moves in shadows, breathing its own invisible breath. Beneath the silence, an opening question rises like incense. What happened here when the world was young and the fire was small? We do not answer quickly. We trace the question the way one traces the curve of a sacred symbol, slowly, with devotion. The chapter moves with meditative pacing, following the arc of the stone circle as though following a quiet chant that has no words, only rhythm. The enclosure feels intentional, not accidental, not merely the result of time or collapse. It feels like an embrace made of carved silence. The pillars stand in a ring like a congregation of stone, shoulders of limestone lifted toward the night. Their surfaces hold the memory of chisel marks, the patient labor of hands that did not write history, yet carved something that would outlast breath. The space between them feels like a held inhale, an empty center that is not empty at all. Whispers tell us that the circle was a way of noticing time, not measuring it with numbers, but feeling it, through seasons, through the turning of the sky, through the quiet changes in wind and light. Some believe this ring was calendar before calendars had names, a place where the sun's angle and the stars' return were observed with reverence, as if the heavens were a scripture written in motion. You can almost imagine it. People coming when certain stars rose, when certain winds arrived, when the earth smelled of a new season. Not because they owned the land, but because the land called them back. The circle did not belong to one person. It belonged to return itself. Others believed the circle was something deeper still. A threshold. A place where people gather to speak with what lives beyond sight. The dead, the sky, the unseen laws of the wild. In those early days, the boundary between the living and the invisible may have felt thinner. The night was not entertainment. It was a presence. The darkness contained dangers and mysteries, and the circle may have been a way to meet that presence without being swallowed by it. We layer myth and memory gently, like veils. In the mind's eye, the center of the ring becomes a stage without actors, yet full of presence. A fire glows low, not roaring, not triumphant, but small enough to feel precious. Its light trembles on stone. Its warmth reaches outward like a careful hand. Around it, shadows move across carved surfaces. Animals etched in limestone, symbols that watch from the pillar's skin. The fox, the serpent, the boar, the bird, not as decoration, but as witnesses. In this imagined ritual, the wild is invited into the sacred, not chased away, not made small. The circle holds the night the way a bowl holds water, gathering what would otherwise spill into darkness and disappear. There is no altar that shouts its purpose, no clear script of what was said or sung, only the certainty that the circle was built for something that required enclosure, repetition, and awe. Some believe the building itself was the ceremony, the carrying of stone, the shaping, the shared strain, the rhythm of many hands moving with one breath. When you do such work together, you do not only create a structure, you create a bond. You create a memory that lives in muscle and heartbeat, a wall of meaning raised from the simplest materials, intention and time. And that is where the contradiction softens into mystery. The builders lived without grand walls, yet they raised a wall of meaning. They lived without cities, yet they created a center. They lived without written vows, yet they formed a vow in stone. It is as if the sacred came first, quietly, insistently, and everything else followed afterward, trying to catch up with what the soul had already built. The circle holds that paradox in its silence. If you stand within it, truly stand, with your thoughts softened, you may feel something like an echo. Not a sound exactly, but a sensation, a subtle pressure in the air, as if the night remembers where the fire once was, as if the stones remember the shape of voices. Where memory fades, the circle does not fade. It remains empty and complete. The emotional current shifts from curiosity to a calm ache, because there is tenderness in arriving late to a ceremony that never truly ended. The fire is gone, yet the center still feels warm in the imagination. The voices have dissolved, yet the space between pillars still holds their outline. The ritual has vanished, yet the ring continues to stand as if waiting for the next breath to begin. The final image is quiet, embers fading, red turning to dark, smoke thinning into the cold night air. A last star passing overhead, unseen by anyone except stone, and the circle remains beneath the sky's slow bowl, holding the night as it always has, without asking to be understood, without demanding belief. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it was meant to be felt, only briefly, only softly, like starlight on limestone. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as sleep approaches, we let the circle keep its secret. We let the night settle back into its ancient embrace. We leave the chamber the way one leaves a sacred hall, quietly, without closing the door too loudly, knowing that the ritual is still there, waiting, in the dark. It is said that the oldest miracles are not loud. They do not arrive with trumpets or proclamations. They arrive with palms pressed into damp earth, with fingers gritty from limestone dust, with breath visible in cold morning air. The invitation begins here, small and human. A pair of hands steadying a stone, a thumb wiping dust from a carved line, a slow exhale, turning to mist, disappearing into dawn. We hear no commands, no shout of power, only the steady rhythm of work, patient as prayer. Beneath the silence, a question rises, almost too gentle to hold. Who organized this miracle when no throne had claimed the world? The morning light is pale, and the land seems to have just awakened. The hill waits above the plains, veiled in thin mist, as if still deciding whether to reveal its secret. And yet the work is already underway in our imagining, because the sanctuary does not appear in a single moment. It arrives through return, through repetition, through many hands moving with one breath. Whispers tell us that people came from scattered horizons, not as armies, not as subjects, but as families, elders, wanderers, drawn by rumor, by tradition, by a call that needed no written decree. In forgotten corners of the earth, the sacred can travel faster than ink. A story spoken beside a fire can cross valleys and seasons. A name carried in breath can become a compass. Some believe there were those who watched the sky carefully, keepers of starlight, readers of the turning. Others believe there were those who listened to the earth, watchers of seasons, of rains, of the quiet shift in wind that tells you the world is changing. And some believe there were story keepers, elders whose power was not in possession, but in remembrance. Not kings, but guides. Their authority did not press down like iron. It rested lightly, like a hand on a shoulder. It was the kind of authority that gathers, not conquers, that invites, not demands. And perhaps that is why the labor itself becomes the ritual. Some believe the building was the ceremony, the carrying, the shaping, the shared strain turning into shared meaning. Imagine the first stones chosen, limestone pulled from the earth like pale bones. Imagine the weight of them, the stubbornness, the slow negotiation between human muscle and ancient rock. The sanctuary does not rise through violence. It rises through patience, through coordination without written plans, through trust that is felt rather than signed. The hill becomes a meeting place of breath, and each stone begins to hold an echo. As we deepen into the chapter, the emotional journey becomes intimate. We feel the invisible labor behind the stones, not in grand gestures, but in the small, repeated acts that history rarely records. A shoulder pressed against a rope, a foot braced on gravel, hands adjusting grip, then adjusting again, until the weight begins to move. Where memory fades, the ground remembers. Each pillar seems to contain the imprint of many bodies beneath its lifting. Not one hero, not one crowned name, but a long chain of effort, shared and steady like waves. And here, a strange tenderness enters, the idea that cooperation is rare enough to feel like forbidden knowledge. We are used to monuments telling stories of power, of rulers, of conquest, of the loud announcement of dominance. But this sanctuary grows from something softer. It grows from people living lightly upon the land, yet deciding, together, to raise a wall of meaning. The contradiction glows gently. A monumental place created by those without grand walls. No cities behind them. No palaces. No carved boast of ownership. Only the decision to return and to build. We linger on small images, because small images are where the sacred often hides. A drink of water passed from hand to hand, the vessel worn smooth by use. The pause that follows, where everyone breathes at once, and the work seems to listen for a moment. A child sitting at the edge of the gathering, tracing a carved line with a fingertip, learning a sacred alphabet that has no letters, only shapes and creatures and spirals. Marked by the moon, the stones feel alive with attention. A fox etched in limestone, a serpent curving like a thought, a boar bristling in stillness. The child does not read these images as we might. The child feels them, like stories pressed into skin. And somewhere, perhaps, an elder watches without speaking, because speaking is not always needed when the work itself is the language. The sun climbs slowly, and the shadows shift across the chamber. Dust floats in the air like a veil. The sanctuary grows, not in a rush, but in layers of return. Days become seasons. Seasons become memory, and the stones remain, receiving every effort, absorbing every breath, as if the earth itself is learning to remember through human hands. In time, the temple stands, not as a victory, as an offering. And still, we do not know the names of the builders. We do not know their faces. We do not know what they called themselves when they spoke into the night. Their stories did not become ink. Their achievements did not become royal lineage. They became stone. The chapter closes with quiet gratitude for unnamed hands, and with melancholy too, because this is the cost of such ancient beauty. It survives, but it does not explain. It remains, but it does not confess. Perhaps it was never meant to belong to a single name. Perhaps the sanctuary was the name, written in cooperation, carved in breath, sealed in dust. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as sleep approaches, we let the hill hold what it has always held, the tenderness of work done together long ago, hands without kings, still standing in silence. It is said that sometimes the world changes without making a sound, not with thunder, not with war, not with the sky splitting open, only with a subtle shift in the air, like the moment before a storm that never arrives. A pressure you feel more than you hear, a quiet rearranging, as though the world has moved its furniture while no one was watching. The hill feels the same, and yet different. Göbekli Tepe rests beneath a wide sky, veiled in pale light. The grasses move as they always have, and the stones stand with their old patience. But something in the atmosphere suggests a turning, an invisible hinge beginning to swing. Beneath the silence, the question comes softly. What changed, and why did the sacred begin to turn? We do not rush toward an answer. We drift into the feeling of transformation, the way one drifts into sleep, slowly, without resistance. The turning is not a single event. It is a long, quiet movement, like a spiral traced in dust. Some believe the change began with seasons, not the seasons themselves, which have always turned, but the way humans began to notice them, the tightening of hunger and abundance, the delicate arithmetic of survival, when the grain is scarce, when the animals move farther, when the cold arrives early. In forgotten corners of the earth, the body learns time before the mind does. The body remembers what the stomach has known. The body watches the sky because the sky decides what grows. And the sanctuary, this circle of stone, this chamber of carved silence, may have become a place where those observations gathered, a place where the turning of seasons became sacred, where the invisible patterns of the world were honored in ritual rather than measured in numbers. Whispers tell us the gatherings reshaped the people who gathered. When humans return to the same place again and again, they begin to become something else. They begin to weave continuity. They begin to recognize familiar faces, familiar stories, familiar gestures. The act of returning creates a center, not only on the land, but inside the mind. Some believe Göbekli Tepe was not only a destination, but a seed, a quiet seed of togetherness. They imagine groups arriving from scattered horizons, families, elders, wanderers, drawn by the sanctuary's pull. At first, they come as they always have, light upon the land, carrying what they need, leaving few traces behind. But the sanctuary calls them back, and with each return, their lives begin to orbit the hill. Togetherness becomes a pattern, and the pattern becomes a way of living. The sacred, in this telling, does not follow civilization. It summons it. Others believe the opposite, that the temple rose as a farewell to an older life, a last hymn sung to the wild before the wild was pushed farther away. In this version, the sanctuary is not the beginning of settlement, but the closing ceremony of wandering, a deliberate act of devotion to a world that was changing, climates shifting, landscapes tightening, herds moving differently, the old balance becoming fragile. Here, the stones are not a seed. They are a goodbye. The deep exploration moves like a dream through thresholds. We feel the tension between roaming and returning, between open horizons and chosen centers. The horizon, once endless and unclaimed, begins to feel different when you have a place you always come back to. The mind begins to mark distances, not by how far you can go, but by how far you are from home. Yet in the beginning, there may have been no word for home, only the hill, only the circle, only the ritual of arrival. The stones hold steady as they always do. They do not change with human moods. Their surfaces keep the same carved animals, fox, serpent, boar, bird, silent and watchful. But the humans around them may have begun to weave new patterns, more permanent, more bound to place. A shelter built a little closer to the ridge, a path worn deeper into the soil, a store of grain hidden like a secret under stone. Small choices repeated until they become a turning. Marked by the moon, the sanctuary becomes both cradle and crossroads. Cradle, because it holds the earliest shape of a shared world. Crossroads, because in its shadow, the old way of life begins to fade. A historical contradiction lingers like incense, drifting through the chamber of thought. The temple seems to precede the life that should have built it. The monument arrives before the city. The sacred architecture stands before the structures of settlement. It is as though cause and effect have traded masks, as though the thread has been turned by hands we cannot see. What if devotion came first? What if the desire to gather around meaning, around ritual, around story, around the sky, created the conditions for permanence? What if the temple did not reflect a settled world, but called one into being? Or what if the temple was the last bright flare of an older world, raised precisely because something was slipping away? We do not decide. We let the mystery remain veiled. The final reflection is hushed. The day leans toward evening. The sun lowers behind the ridge in slow dignity, pouring faded copper light across limestone and dust. Shadows lengthen between the pillars like dark ribbons. The air cools, and the animals carved in stone seem to deepen in silence. We watch the horizon soften, and we feel the thread of human story tightening, softly, inexorably, like a knot being tied in the dark. Not cruelly, not loudly, simply inevitably. Wonder begins to border on grief, because every turning contains an ending. The old world of open horizons, of wandering without anchors, begins to dim, and something new begins to form, more permanent, more structured, more bound to place. The stones do not tell us which world is better. They only witness the turning. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood all at once. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as night approaches again, the hill becomes quiet beneath its veil of stars, holding the moment of turning inside itself, like a spiral hidden under dust, leaving us suspended between what was ending and what had only just begun. It is said that the earth knows how to close its eyes, not suddenly, not with violence, but with a slow, careful motion, like a curtain drawn at the end of a long ceremony, like a veil lowered over something too tender to be left exposed. Our invitation begins with a strange act of tenderness. The sanctuary is being covered, not destroyed in rage, not shattered in war, not defaced by conquering hands. Instead, is filled, sealed, returned to the hill as if returning a borrowed object to its rightful keeper. Beneath the silence, the question arrives like a slow bell. Why would hands that raised a sacred place choose to bury it? We do not answer. We descend. The chapter moves downward, layer by layer, as though following falling dust. The air grows quieter in the imagination. The light becomes softer, more filtered, as if the world is dimming on purpose. Earth begins to gather where open space once lived. The chamber, once a ring holding the night, starts to become a hidden interior again. Some believe the burial was protection, a quiet hiding of knowledge meant only for certain seasons, certain generations. In forgotten corners of the earth, it is not always safe for the sacred to remain visible. Perhaps there were threats, human, animal, unseen. Perhaps the world changed its mood. Perhaps the sanctuary became too powerful a magnet, drawing the wrong kind of attention. So the builders chose the oldest kind of shield concealment. Stone can be broken, but stone buried deep can sleep for ages. Others believe the burial was closure, a ritual ending performed with care, like folding a garment after a long ceremony. Not because the garment is worthless, because it is precious, because you do not leave sacred fabric scattered on the ground. You fold it. You place it away. You let it rest until it is needed again, or until it becomes part of memory. In this telling, the burial is not an erasure. It is a final act of respect. We drift through possible meanings, without forcing a verdict. The mind moves like a slow torch through a chamber of choices, illuminating each thought briefly, then letting it fade. Perhaps the sanctuary had served its purpose. Perhaps it was built for a particular turning of stars, a particular cycle of seasons, a particular generation's sorrow. Perhaps the rituals that once filled the circle were complete, like a song reaching its last note. And when a song ends, silence must be honored too. Perhaps a shift in belief made the old circle feel too heavy with memory. There are places that begin to carry the weight of too many gatherings, too many griefs, too many vows spoken into smoke. A sanctuary can become a mirror that reflects back everything people have poured into it. And sometimes, when the reflection grows too intense, the only mercy is to cover it, to soften it, to let the earth absorb the excess. Or perhaps, more quietly, perhaps the builders feared something. Not a named enemy, not a marching army, but the subtle fear that moves through a changing world. Hunger tightening, weather shifting, the wild retreating, the unseen becoming restless. In such times, people do not always destroy what they fear. Sometimes they hide it, hoping the earth will keep it calm. The mystery deepens because the burial is not an accident. It is a message spoken in soil. The hands that fill the chamber do so with intention. They do not toss earth in haste. They place it. They layer it. They seal the stones as though tucking in a sleeping child. Dust settles into carved grooves, into fox and serpent, into boar and bird, softening their edges, dimming their presence, returning the wild to a quieter form. Where memory fades, dust becomes a language of farewell. The emotional arc turns gently from awe to melancholy. We imagine the final night before sealing. A last fire, small and careful, glowing at the center. Not a feast, not a celebration, something more intimate. A closing prayer, perhaps, offered without words. The pillars stand in their ring, their shoulders catching the trembling light. The carvings look alive for a moment, shadows moving across them like water. There's a last look at the animals etched in stone, a last hand resting on cold limestone, fingers tracing a carved line, as if trying to remember it with the skin. A last breath, visible in the night air, drifting upward, then disappearing. And then silence. Not the silence of abandonment, the silence of completion. The earth begins to fall. Not in a collapse, but in a slow descent, grain by grain, layer by layer, like time itself returning to its oldest posture. The chamber fills. The space between pillars narrows. The circle that once held the night is now held by the hill. It is said that the earth is the most patient keeper. It holds what is buried not as a prison, but as a cradle. And so the sanctuary disappears from sight. Days pass. Seasons turn. Rains come and go. Grasses return. Thin at first, then thicker, swaying in the wind as if nothing beneath them has ever been carved. The hill smooths its surface, calming itself, settling into an ordinary shape again. A ridge, a rise, a sleeping shoulder. And beneath the silence, the temple sleeps. Sealed not by forgetting, but by intention. A sacred place put gently away. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in full daylight. Perhaps it was meant to be held in darkness until the world was quiet enough to deserve it. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as sleep approaches, we let the hill keep its lullaby. Dust settling, earth breathing, stone dreaming, an ancient circle descending into the soft arms of the ground, forever hidden, forever present, forever waiting. It is said that the earth keeps secrets the way the body keeps breath, quietly, without needing to boast. And sometimes, when the world is still enough, those secrets rise not as a shout, but as a soft disturbance in dust. The opening image is small. A wind moves across a hillside and lifts a thin veil of soil. For a moment, the surface loosens. A faint curve appears beneath the dust, barely a shape, hardly more than a suggestion, like a memory surfacing in the mind just before waking, when you cannot yet name it, but you feel its presence. Marked by the moon, the ridge looks ordinary, until it does not. Beneath the silence, a question is whispered. How does the buried sacred return to the world of light? This is not the kind of question that answers itself in a single sentence. It answers itself in patience, in waiting, in listening. So this chapter follows the long patience of discovery, but it does so like a dream rather than a report. We imagine careful hands parting the earth, not hurried, not greedy, but attentive. Fingertips move through soil as if reading a muted scroll. The ground is approached like a sacred text that cannot be forced open. You do not tear pages from it. You turn them slowly. Whispers tell us that those hands listen for stone, not only with ears, but with touch, feeling the subtle resistance beneath dust, the shift in texture that means something old is near. The way a buried edge catches the light differently, even when it is still half asleep under soil. In forgotten corners of the earth, discovery is sometimes less like finding and more like being invited. Some believe the hill revealed itself only when the world was ready to be unsettled by it, as if the temple waited for a certain kind of listener, one who could hold wonder without turning it into noise, one who could kneel and be humbled and still keep their hands gentle. Others believe it was simply chance, a coincidence, a farmer's step, an eroded slope, a shift in weather, a stray glance at the right angle. And yet even chance here feels like disguised design, because when the wind lifts dust just enough to reveal a curve of stone beneath, it is difficult not to feel that the earth is speaking in its own language, soft, indifferent, precise. Beneath the silence, the hill begins to change. Not dramatically, but undeniably. As soil is removed, the edges of the chamber reappear, circles resting inside circles, like breaths held for thousands of years. The first exposed stones look strangely fresh, as if time has protected them rather than harmed them. Dust slides away from carved surfaces, like sleep leaving the eyes. And suddenly, the past rises without speaking. A carved fox steps forward from the limestone. A serpent curls in eternal motion. A boar's bristles catch the light. These animals look newly made, not because they are young, but because they have been sheltered, veiled, kept in darkness like a sacred object wrapped in cloth. The pillars stand again beneath open sky, as if they never left. And this is where the emotional journey shifts into reverent disorientation, because the mind is not built to hold such depth easily. We feel small before the ages that have passed. We feel the strange lightness of our own lives, measured against stone that has waded through millennia of wind, rain, silence, and forgetting. We begin to understand how easily meaning can sleep beneath our feet, and how often we walk above it unaware. Where memory fades in humans, the earth continues. The hill had been only a hill for so long. Grass grew. Animals walked. Seasons turned. Storms came and passed. Somewhere, people lived their lives, made their meals, raised their children, never knowing that beneath a thin layer of soil lay a sanctuary older than their idea of old. And now, with the chamber exposed, the world is asked to rearrange itself again. The implied forbidden knowledge is not a secret text. It is a quiet fact. History is not always a straight road. Sometimes it is a circle. Sometimes what was buried returns, not when we plan, but when the earth decides the veil can lift. Sometimes the past does not remain behind us. Sometimes it resurfaces at our feet, asking us to reconsider what we thought we knew. And still, the temple does not explain itself. The stones do not give speeches. They offer presence. They offer silence shaped into form. The more we discover, the more we realize we are not in control of what has been found. The hill is no longer only a hill, yet it remains mysterious. It is an open chamber and a sealed question at the same time. Dusk settles on revealed stone. The light becomes honeyed, then fades toward blue. Shadows deepen between pillars like quiet water pooling. The carved animals seem to retreat slightly, becoming half shadow, half memory again. The wind returns, carrying dust in gentle swirls, as if the earth is already trying to tuck the sanctuary back into its own keeping. Beneath the silence, we linger, not to solve, to witness. And in the final hush of this chapter, we are left with a gentle sensation, like dust on the tongue of the world, reminding us that there are still chambers beneath our certainty. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in full daylight. Perhaps it was meant to appear like a dream, briefly, softly, only long enough to change the shape of our waking. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as night arrives again, the stones remain under the dark bowl of stars, revealed, yet still veiled, holding their quiet map in dust, waiting for the next breath of wind to turn the page. It is said that when a place is very old, it becomes a mirror, not because it reflects our faces, but because it reflects our longing. We begin with competing whispers, like many storytellers speaking in the dark. Their voices do not argue like soldiers. They drift like incense, overlapping and dissolving into one another. One voice says softly, "It was a temple." Another voice answers, just as gently, "It was something else." And in the space between them, the opening question forms, quiet, patient, and unending. What do we think we know? And what are we only borrowing from imagination? Beneath the silence, Göbekli Tepe stands as it always has, unmoved by opinion, untroubled by debate. The hill holds its shape. The stone holds its cool patience. But the meanings placed upon it, those drift like smoke. We walk into the chamber of interpretation, as if walking into a sacred hall with no altar. The air is filled not with certainty, but with possibility. Each thought arrives like a candle flame, brief, warm, and easily blown. Some believe it was a sanctuary for sky watching, a place where people noticed the turning of seasons, where time was not measured with numbers, but felt through stars returning, winds shifting, shadows lengthening. In this version, the circle is a celestial instrument made of stone, a way to stand inside the night and sense that the world has a rhythm larger than hunger. Whispers tell us the builders watched the heavens as one might watch a beloved face, patiently, attentively, searching for patterns that promised continuity. Others believe it was a gathering place for rites of passage, a threshold where the young became older, where grief became bearable, where vows were made without writing. A circle of stone that held the night, so that humans could speak into it, and be answered, not with words, but with the feeling that they were not alone. In this telling, the chamber becomes a memory house, not a house for bodies, but a house for meaning. Some believe the carved animals are a language. Fox, serpent, boar, bird, each one a symbol, a warning, a blessing. A scripture written not in ink, but in limestone. A vocabulary of the wild, carved into permanence as if to say, the world outside the circle is sacred too, and it will always be watching. Others believe the animals are simply the world. Not code, not cipher, not secret alphabet, just devotion, an honoring of what lived beside them, what threatened them, what fed them, what haunted them. In those early days, the wild was not a distant concept. It was the breath of life itself. To carve it was to bow to it. The contradictions do not feel like conflict here. They feel like a sacred chorus of uncertainty. And as we sink deeper into the chapter, we begin to notice something even more mysterious than the stones, the human mind, because the mind reaches for structure when faced with ancient silence. It wants to build a neat room around the unknown, to place labels on the shelves, temple, calendar, cemetery, meeting hall. The mind is a kind of architect too, and it does not like empty space. Where memory fades, imagination begins to fill the gaps. Not always dishonestly, often tenderly. We want the past to be readable. We want it to speak our language. We want it to tell us that we are not strangers to it. And yet Göbekli Tepe offers no written confession, no carved declaration of purpose, no sentence that begins, "We built this because." The absence itself becomes its own mystery, inviting both humility and longing. Because when there is no script, the silence becomes a canvas, and each listener paints a different image upon it. Some paint a temple, some paint a farewell, some paint a cradle of civilization, some paint an ending of wandering, and perhaps, in a quieter truth, the place was many things at once, temple and threshold, gathering and goodbye, memory house and mirror, a stage without actors, yet full of presence. We linger with that possibility, letting the need for finality loosen its grip. There is something calming in the resistance of the sight to a single narrative. It is a reminder, soft as dust, that not everything must be solved to be understood. The emotional arc shifts here, almost imperceptibly. like the sky turning from deep blue toward dawn. We move from the desire for answers to the comfort of open questions. We realize that certainty can be heavy, but wonder is light. Wonder does not demand. It simply attends. Marked by the moon, the stones seem indifferent to our conclusions. They do not approve. They do not deny. They remain. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson beneath the version most often told, that the past is not obligated to fit our expectations. The past is not obligated to be simple. It may be layered, veiled, oceanic in its depth, like a spiral hidden under dust, only partially visible no matter how carefully we look. As night returns to the hill, the whispers soften. The most often told version fades into gentler focus, like a story ending not with a period, but with an ellipsis. The arguments, if they ever were arguments, dissolve into the wind. What remains is the stone itself, steady, moonlit, and uninterested in our certainty. Perhaps it was never meant to give us a final answer. Perhaps it was meant to give us a quieter gift, a place to practice reverence for what we cannot fully name. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And in the final hush, we let the chorus of uncertainty continue, soft, sacred, unresolved, while the temple, whatever it truly was, stands beneath the stars, still listening, still waiting, still beyond the reach of the stories we tell. It is said that time is not always a straight river. Sometimes it is still water, holding the sky and its surface, waiting for a single touch. The opening image is a ripple spreading across that stillness, except the water is time itself. A sanctuary rises in the distant past, and its influence, whether real, imagined, or both, moves outward like a slow vibration. The ripple does not hurry. It does not crash. It widens, gentler and wider, until you can no longer see where it began. Beneath the silence, a question arrives like a soft note held in the dark. What does a forgotten temple awaken in those who come after? We drift beyond the hill without leaving it behind. Göbekli Tepe remains where it is, stone and dust, ridge and sky. Yet the idea of it travels. It passes from one mind to another, from one century to another, like a candle flame carried carefully through corridors. A place can be far away, and still move something inside you. A place can be buried for thousands of years, and still lift a veil in the human heart. Whispers tell us that some discoveries do not simply add to knowledge. They rearrange it. They shift the story of beginnings. Some believe Göbekli Tepe changes the way we imagine the first gatherings. It suggests that the sacred may have called humans together before comfort did, before permanence did, before power learned how to name itself. That the urge to circle a fire, to raise stone, to carve animals into limestone, may have been older than the desire to build walls and claim land. In forgotten corners of the earth, the soul may have built first, and the body followed. Others believe its true gift is quieter, not a new timeline, not a revision of history, but a reminder. Wonder is older than explanation, that even in the earliest days, humans may have felt the need to stand still for a moment and let the world be immense, to listen to the night, to honor the turning of stars, to carve the wild into stone as if saying, "We see you, we fear you, we belong to you." We layer scenes like soft veils, the stones in early morning fog, their edges softened as if they are still dreaming. The carved animals half-lit, half-shadow, fox and serpent, boar and bird, quiet witnesses. The wind moving through grasses, touching the ridge like a slow hand. The hill breathing its ancient patience into the air. Then the veil lifts slightly, and we see distant ridges beyond. Other quiet heights, other sleeping places. Not as a claim of direct connection, but as a feeling that the earth holds many chambers, and humans have always been drawn to thresholds. There are mountain monasteries that rise above clouds like prayers, desert gates framed by broken stone, jungle ruins where roots cradle carved walls, sunken cities that glimmer beneath water like forgotten vows. We do not say that Göbekli Tepe caused them. We do not force a lineage where time has erased the thread. Instead, we let the idea of echo do its work. The urge to gather repeats. The urge to mark a place as meaningful repeats. The urge to make the invisible visible, through stone, through ritual, through architecture, repeats across eras like a familiar refrain. Where memory fades, the human gesture remains. A circle, a threshold, a sanctuary, a hush, and something in us recognizes it, even when we do not know why. Because the echo is not always in facts. Sometimes the echo is in the shape of longing. We feel the thinness of the present against the depth of what came before. Our days, so full of schedules, screens, and noise, begin to feel like a brief flicker compared to the long, slow breathing of stone. We realize how quickly our certainties can crumble, how easily our explanations can turn to dust, while a gesture made in the distant past can still glow. The contradiction deepens into tenderness. The earliest builders are gone, yet their offering remains. Their faces were never recorded. Their names were never carved into monuments. Their voices dissolved into night air thousands of years ago. And still, the shape of their devotion stands, waiting to be noticed by minds they could not imagine. It is a strange kind of generosity, to build something for listeners who do not yet exist. To carve animals into stone knowing that the meaning might slip away, yet carving anyway, because the act itself was sacred. Beneath the silence, we begin to sense that the echo is not demanding. It does not insist on belief. It does not punish doubt. It simply continues, soft and endless, like breath. We return again to the ridge at night. The sky above is the same sky that watched the first circle, stars turning slowly, indifferent and faithful. Starlight rests on limestone. Mist moves in gentle sheets. The pillars stand as they always have, calm and uninterested in our arguments. And yet something has shifted in us. We have been touched by a ripple. Not a dramatic revelation, not a loud certainty, just a quiet understanding that the world is deeper than we can hold in words, that beginnings may be stranger than we thought, that wonder is ancient, that the sacred can outlive its makers and still find new ears. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully explained. Perhaps it was meant to be felt, like the coolness of stone beneath the hand, like the hush of a circle at midnight, like dust lifting briefly in wind and revealing a hidden curve. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as sleep approaches, we let the echo travel on, across time, across minds, across the soft darkness, until it becomes a lullaby of starlight and stone, continuing without end, asking nothing, offering everything. It is said that the final page of a story is not a door closing. It is a lamp dimming. And now, as we come to the gentle closing, the world becomes still. No footsteps, no voices, only the night wind moving through grass, soft as breath. The hill rests beneath a wide sky, and the listener is invited to rest as well. The stones do not ask to be explained. The darkness does not demand interpretation. Everything simply settles. Marked by the moon, Göbekli Tepe becomes a quiet outline against the night, an old shoulder of earth, sleeping in plain sight. And the question that once felt sharp now arrives as something soothing. What if the sacred is not something we conquer with answers, but something we keep company with? We return to the most intimate images, because intimacy is where sleep begins. Dust settling on limestone, grain by grain, like time exhaling. Carvings half in shadow, fox and serpent, boar and bird, no longer symbols to decode, but presences to witness. A coolness in the stone that feels like an old, steady heartbeat. A sense that beneath the surface, there are chambers still holding their breath. Beneath the silence, the hill feels less like a mystery and more like a presence. Not a riddle to solve. A room. An ancient room in the human soul. One we can visit without fully understanding. We stand at its doorway and feel that it has always been there, waiting for us to become quiet enough to enter. Some believe the builders reached toward the stars, that they watched the turning above and felt a pattern in it, a celestial rhythm that made life bearable. In this version, the circle is a way of standing inside the night without being lost in it. The stones become a conversation with starlight, carved into earth. Some believe the builders reached toward their dead, toward what had left them, toward what they could not keep. In this version, The chamber is a threshold where grief becomes ritual, where absence is given a shape that can be carried. The circle becomes a place to speak into darkness and feel, for a moment, that darkness is listening back. Some believe the builders reached toward each other, toward community, toward shared breath, toward the strange miracle of cooperation before thrones and titles hardened the world. In this version, the sanctuary is not only for the sky or the unseen, but for the living, an embrace made of stone, a vow of togetherness, repeated until it became real. And in the quiet, all these versions feel like different faces of the same longing, a longing to belong, a longing to hold the world's vastness without being crushed by it, a longing to make a small center in the wide wilderness of existence. We acknowledge the mysteries that remain, the purpose, the burial, the silence. We remember the tenderness of the covering, the long descent into earth, how the sanctuary was not destroyed, but tucked away, sealed as if with care, returned to the hill like something precious placed back into a chest. We remember the strange inversion, the temple raised before history learned its name, the cause that seems to arrive before the effect. We remember the carvings, vivid as dreams, and we remember how quickly meaning can slip away even when stone remains. And then we let it all remain, undisturbed, like sleeping chambers beneath a floor. Where memory fades, the need to force an answer fades with it. We begin to feel the comfort of open questions. Because questions can be soft. Questions can be companions. Questions can be the shape of reverence. The implied forbidden knowledge becomes a gentle truth. The past is not finished speaking, but it speaks in pauses, not declarations. It speaks in wind moving through grass, in starlight resting on limestone, in the way a carved animal looks half alive in shadow, in the way a hill can feel watchful without moving. And perhaps that is why Göbekli Tepe endures so powerfully in the imagination. Not because it gives us certainty, because it teaches us how to sit beside uncertainty without fear, to be near what we cannot fully name and still feel held. Now the final reflection begins to descend, softly, like eyelids closing. The hill fades into darkness. The outline of stones becomes less distinct, as if the earth is drawing the sanctuary inward again. The wind continues, gentle and steady. The stars remain, patient witnesses, turning slowly, as they did when the first circle stood beneath them. We allow the mind to loosen its grip. We release the urge to claim. We release the urge to finish the story with a conclusion sharp enough to hold. Because some stories do not end with a solution. They end with a hush. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in full daylight. Perhaps it was always meant to be a temple that sleeps, beneath the ground, beneath our questions, beneath our modern noise, quietly, endlessly, holding the world inside a circle of night. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And now, as the night deepens and sleep approaches, we let the echoes soften into silence. The temple, raised before history learned its name, returns to its oldest role, not to explain the world, but to hold it, quietly, endlessly, as we drift gently into the dark.